Oregon has to win at least 10 games to make the playoff next year. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, not less, more. New customers, join today. You'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. College football playoff, Josh Pate, praiseworthy of Oregon's wide receiver duo. Thoughts on that coming later. And what's upcoming for men's basketball this week. All that on today's show. But we start with the college football playoff because the new 5+7 format absolutely benefits the Ducks as it does really any team, particularly in the Big Ten or the SEC. In theory, being in the ACC or Big 12, you're also helped by the 5+7. But it doesn't actually matter as much. Now, it helps. It could, right? Having the 5 highest ranked conference champions, ensuring there's just the one G5 conference team in there, which was always the expectation. That's where we've gotten to now. But Oregon has to win at least 10 games to get in there. And if you're in a conference that's not in the ACC or not in the Big 12, that's probably the standard. Because if you're in the Big 10 or the SEC, winning 10 games is just a lot harder. And strength of schedule still matters. And the way that you are viewed by the committee still matters a great deal. I know it can be easy in your mind to think about, the college football playoff, it's gone to 12 teams. Well, now everybody who deserves to get in will get in. No, there are still going to be the exact down to the letter debates about who should be in the playoff and who should. Well, they've got to win over so-and-so. Well, they've got to win over here. For Oregon, they've got to win at least 10 games. That is the object. Could a 9-3 Big Ten team get in? Yes. But could Oregon with this particular Big Ten schedule? I actually don't think so. The Big Ten is a very good, very deep conference. As you move towards the bottom, it thins out a little bit, but up at the top, it's really, really good. But in 2024, I think this is a schedule where Oregon has to win at least 10 games. Their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 10.5. And if they go over that, they're in no matter what, right? Because you look at what happened last year. Oregon would have been in the 12-team playoff with an 11-1 regular season, with some quality wins I'll get to in a moment, and a loss in the conference championship game. They were 11-2. They'd lost to Washington twice. They would have been into the 12-team playoff. But last year, Oregon was 11-1, and really, they didn't have that many super high-quality wins. That was the knock on Oregon as opposed to Texas. Because Texas, if you recall, had a win at Alabama by 10 points. Very impressive. Oregon didn't have a win that good. And once you look at Oregon's 12-game regular season last year, there's the one loss to Washington, and then your wins, the best wins, were 13th ranked Utah at the time. They ended the year 8-4, and there's that interesting debate. I come down on one side, some people come down on other. I value what is being played on that particular day, barring a radical change, like Colorado, for instance. Utah was ranked 13th and I think 6-1 when Oregon played them. They won the game in Salt Lake City, 35-6. Utah ended the season 8-4. Well, suddenly that win doesn't feel like the 13th best team in the country, but that's how Utah was playing at the time. That's where I come down there. USC, 7-5. Again, that was one of Oregon's better wins last year. I mean, Cal was a 6-6 bowl team. He put up 62 points. Okay. Oregon State was probably the best individual win for Oregon all season in terms of caliber of opponent mixed with margin of victory. Oregon State beat Utah early in the year, but Oregon State again ended the year 8-4. Colorado was 19th when they came to Autzen Stadium, ended the year 4-8, and he had a road win against Texas Tech, who was 6-6 at the end of the regular season. But the reason that 10 or more wins, assuming the season follows the same sort of trajectory, automatically gets Oregon in, is because if they're beating teams the way that they beat teams a year ago, in the eyes of the committee, that clearly matters. Because strength of schedule-wise, Oregon did not have the wins that Texas had. But what matters in those sorts of instances, whether fans of certain schools want to admit it or not? Your brand power absolutely matters. Oregon is very strong. And your eye test matters. The committee absolutely takes those things into account. So if Oregon wins 10 games, but let's say they lose their two big, their new Big Ten games against Ohio State and at Michigan, but they win all the other games and they look very impressive doing so, that team will be inside the top 12. I feel pretty confident in saying that. But 10 is the cutoff. You go to 9 wins with this schedule? No, I don't see it. Because here's Oregon's schedule for those who don't have it memorized yet. I sort of do, though I don't quite have the middle part of it down. I'm getting there on my memorization. You open with Idaho, it's an FCS game, Boise State, and then Corvallis. So that non-conference slate does not have anyone who is in the Power 4. Now, is Oregon State still a Power 5 quality team? Yes, I fully believe that. They could be an 8 to 10 win team with their schedule next year. They could be a 7-win team, but still, it's better than nothing. We'll see how much they're able to do next year with a lot of turnover on that roster. But they've got a new head coach. They've got some new players, but they've also done some nice things in the transfer portal. But Idaho, Boise State, and Oregon State, even if the Beavs have a really good year, that's not going to be a marquee win. That's not going to be a marquee game early in the season because Oregon State getting ranked is something that won't take place until later in the year, if at all, depending on how the Beavs season goes. Then you start with UCLA and Michigan State. Neither one of those teams are going to be conference contenders. Their win totals are both 5.5. I think UCLA goes under. I think Michigan State could go either way, but the Spartans are coming to Autzen Stadium. I feel pretty good about the Ducks' chances there. If you were to lose the game to Ohio State and then beat Purdue and Illinois, but you beat them the way that Oregon beat Cal last year, right? Or Washington State, 38-24, I think was the final score, or against Wazoo, and Cal was 62-19, and Arizona State was, 42-40. I don't even remember. It was a lot to a little. It was a lot to a little. If you then go lose the Michigan game, but then you win your next 3, you dominate Maryland, beat Wisconsin on the road, beat Washington at home, who will be a good but not great team, I think that'll be just enough. Style points are going to matter. But without a marquee non-conference game in there, I don't think Oregon will get the benefit of the doubt by losing 3 Big Ten games. Because if they do lose 3 Big Ten games, it would probably be Ohio State at home, at Michigan, and either Washington at home or at Wisconsin. And I think at Wisconsin would be the more likely of those 2 games to lose. So if your best win is then either Oregon State or Washington or a bunch of blowout wins at a 9-3 pace, I don't think that's enough. At least not guaranteed. But if Oregon goes 10-2 and they beat teams the way they're capable of, I think at the very least they're in. Certainly if they go 11-1, they'll be playing in the Big Ten championship game and they will be a shoo-in for the playoff. But 10 games is the threshold there. That's what you have to be able to accomplish. If you make the Big Ten championship game, you're getting into the playoff. There's been a lot of talk about auto bids, and I'm going to discuss this a bit more later in the show, and who should get what and everything like that. But I think that for Oregon, the standard for success last year, I said going into the year, was you got to make the Pac-12 championship game. I don't hold the same standard in the same light going into this year, but it is certainly a goal. Last year, it was an expectation. This year, it is a goal and a very attainable one. I'd knock it down just a touch because I think you have a stronger number 3 and 4 team in the Big Ten than you did in the Pac-12 a season ago. I think USC is much improved. Wisconsin could be sneaky nice, but Penn State is the other team that is always good year in and year out. Oregon does not play them this year. So I think 10 wins and Oregon is in. 9 wins, probably out. 10 wins, 11 wins, and obviously 12. Oregon's probably into the playoff. Let me know what you think, though, in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. Those are the handles. DMs and mentions wide open. We've got a ton to get to here on today's show. Absolutely jam-packed. Time to tell you about a new sponsor here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and that's Ibotta. Grocery bills are really expensive these days, but now they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you are purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. So you can buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners just $5 just for trying the Ibotta app using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use that code LOCKEDONCollege. I had a comment the other day on a YouTube show lamenting the lack of visual presentation of the second segment sip, a treasured commodity for the everydayers out there. I appreciate you all so very, very much. Let's get into a couple of mailbag questions here. We're going to sandwich two questions inside of another topic and then close with some basketball and a fun mailbag question later in today's show. So, this question came in via the subtext community, which is where you get priority mailbag access. If you join the flock over there and become a Locked On Ducks insider, you can get breaking news and reactions right to your phone, talk with me one-on-one, all sorts of other perks, as well as priority mailbag access. And the question came in: who are Oregon's most underrated new players for next year? I've got two. I have got two new players, as in individuals that will be on the roster this season that were not on the roster last season for the Ducks. Number one is Matthew Bedford. Matthew Bedford is a transfer from Indiana. He is a sixth-year college football player. He started at guard last year for the Hoosiers, projects to do so at the right guard position for the Ducks. He's replacing a sixth-year guard himself in Stephen Jones. These are both big, hulking bodies, and I think he has the chance to slide right in. You don't hear a lot about guys along the offensive line because they don't record any stats. You only realize that they're there when they, commit a penalty individually. You recognize the unit is there, but individually you only hear a guy's name called when he's doing something wrong. So Matthew Bedford is most definitely one of them for the Ducks. On the other side, this is a tough one. This is a tough one because there are a lot of different options in which I could go. Because for the defensive side of the ball, I could have gone to another offensive player, but I think the offense is pretty darn set. But on the defensive side of the ball, you've got newcomers in the secondary. You've got a returning core of linebackers, but three stud freshmen 4-stars coming into that group to supplement the top three guys who I think are Jeff Bossa, Justin Jacobs, and Devin Jackson, and will probably be a true freshman in that mix, maybe Connor Soley if he sees the field a little bit more. You could have gone along the defensive line, but I'm going into the secondary here. I think Cam Alexander, the transfer from UTSA, is somebody who had a phenomenal season and is getting lost in the shuffle, a little bit like Sione Laulea, who's the number one JUCO corner in this 2024 class. I almost had him there, but I think Alexander is more proven, and there's a greater track record of bringing in transfers from G5 or Power 5 schools to play right away than JUCO guys that come in right away. So I think that for the Ducks, Cam Alexander is somebody who had an outstanding season. I think you could see him push Nico Reed for playing time. That's the role I think he fills, which is not necessarily a starter on the field, but then when called upon, has to play some outside corner, can play inside, and is just kind of a do-it-all sort of defensive back. I think that's a guy that flies under the radar for the Ducks. Those are my two most underrated players. Let me know your thoughts, though. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter. Drop your thoughts. Curious what you are all thinking about for the underrated new players for next year. So One guy that is not flying under the radar is Evan Stewart as a newcomer. Former five-star, grades as a five-star transfer according to 24/7, comes over from Texas A&M. Josh Pate of the Late Kick Show with Josh Pate, who I am a big fan of in many ways, he had some great things to say about Oregon's wide receiver duo when he was looking at the best receiver rooms in all of college football. You'll hear names like Ole Miss in this conversation, but Oregon is certainly right up there, and their wide receiver tandem is indeed elite. So here's what Pate had to say. Quote, Evan Stewart, like many other offensive pieces at Texas A&M, underachieved relative to their ability level. So he gets plugged into an offense where if he underachieves, it's probably on him because he'll be put in perfect position. He'll be surrounded by the right folks. He's got the right guy up there in Will Stein calling plays, end quote. One correction there, Mr. Pate, if you're listening to or watching this show, thank you so much for doing so. Hit the subscribe button, my friend. But if you're watching it, Will Stein is not up there calling plays in the booth. He's down on the field doing it. Now, Josh Pate records his show from Nashville, so maybe he's referring to up in the Pacific Northwest. That could 100% be the context, in which case I retract my criticism of that particular grammatical remark. That being said, the point he's making is absolutely right. Absolutely right. Oregon's wide receiver tandem here, the top two guys, I think are going to be Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson. I think underneath, Johnson is going to be a killer, just like he was a season ago for Bo Nix. He's going to be what Dillon Gabriel had in Drake Stoops at Oklahoma coming over to Oregon. Tez Johnson's going to be that guy. He could push for another 80-plus reception season. Evan Stewart is someone who can take the top off the defense. And Dillon Gabriel, he's not shy about launching the deep ball. On Monday's show, Brian Smith is going to be here, and we're going to ask him a variety of things, as we often do here on the show. A couple of them are mailbag questions. A couple of them are players. And we talk a little bit about Dillon Gabriel, and he'll share his thoughts on what he sees from Gabriel on film. And you'll think about why a guy like Evan Stewart could be really, really good, because contested catch, route running, but also just explosive speed, those things line up very, very well with Dillon Gabriel's skill set at quarterback. That show, just for you everydayers out there, is going to air on Monday, and there will be no show on Tuesday, and then it'll be back in your feeds on Wednesday. Taking just a little vacay and whatnot. But fear not, the content shall continue. So I think that Stewart and Johnson could both have 1,000-yard seasons. I would not sleep on Trayshawn Holden, though, because this question came up regularly, I would say, from listeners and viewers during the season. Is Trayshawn Holden being underutilized? Not underutilized, but not to his full potential. These are two different things. Underutilized means the offense is being held back by his lack of involvement. You cannot look at Oregon's passing game last year, which was top 2 or 3 in all of college football, or the offense in general, which was one of the best in all of college football, and say that the offense was missing something. But to say that Trayshawn Holden was maximizing his individual production is also an inaccurate statement, because he was a guy who they got the ball to on jet sweeps. They got him involved in the screen game. He had some downfield shots, but when Troy Franklin was out, Holden stepped in, and I tell you, I think about that wiggle route at the top of a post he ran right before the half against Liberty, and he makes the catch sliding to the ground. Great throw from Bo Nix, on time as always. I think about that, the long touchdown he had in the Washington game in the Pac-12 title contest down in Las Vegas at the end of the game to get Oregon back within 3. And I think, yeah, he does have another gear, but his lack of maximizing his individual production was not holding the offense back. It could be the case again this year. But if Evan Stewart were to go down, I'd feel pretty good with Trayshawn Holden stepping in to that number 1 receiver role, because he's got a big body, he's got good speed, he's got route running abilities, he's got good hands. I think he showed a lot in the Fiesta Bowl, and I think that top 3 lineup of receivers is excellent. But the top two, as Pate points out, that's among the best in all of college football. There aren't a lot of places that can say, we've got a 5-star who hasn't maximized his potential because the place he came from was just grossly incompetent on offense. I mean, Texas A&M was rotating coordinators, rotating coaches, rotating quarterbacks. It was a mess. It was a complete and utter mess. So he didn't even have 600 yards receiving this past year. He could almost double his production if he comes to Oregon and steps in as the number one receiver, which I expect him to be. And then you've got Tez Johnson, who had over 1,100 yards. He had double-digit touchdowns, pretty sure. I'm going to double-check that real quick. But he also set the Oregon single-season receptions record with over 80. I mean, you just can't get a whole heck of a lot better. He did end the year with 10 touchdowns, 1,182 yards, and 86 catches. That's a dynamic tandem. Josh Pate noticing? Yeah, he's noticing the right thing there. That's the Dillon Gabriel has got everything that he needs. One more mailbag question to get to, and it's going to allow me to do one of my favorite things in the world. Talk about FanDuel. Obviously, get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. They've got everything you need for the NBA. They've got everything you need for college football. Oregon's win total, Heisman odds, Dillon Gabriel's in the top 3. I've said many times, I'd be pleasantly surprised if he's a Heisman finalist, but I don't think he's going to be there. But if you feel differently, then guess what? You can go put your money where your mouth is over at FanDuel. They've got anything and everything you could possibly want. Once the season rolls around, they'll have all sorts of great things for you as well. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot, whatever that is. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, last football-related question here to end the day. This from Justin. Question for Locked On Ducks podcast. That is this very show right here. By the way, thank you for putting out shows daily. Makes my work commute better in the mornings. You have just made my boss at Locked On, Zach Blackerby, a very, very happy customer because I will be forwarding that question along. That's what we're striving for here at the network. Do you think with the new playoff format, the rankings could become even more controversial than they already are? One of my favorite things to do in the world is take an opportunity, bend your ear for a moment of time to talk about why the playoff expanding is a calamity for college football. It's great for the Ducks. It's great for the Ducks. I'm not unhappy about that aspect of it. But Spencer, the college football fan, if I were to take this Oregon shirt off, first of all, you'd see a dad bod, the likes of which you probably never expected to see. Second of all, you would have Spencer, the college football fan. If I strip down the Oregon banner and whatnot, he is just livid with the expansion of the playoff. Because here's one of the myths about playoff expansion. Well, now all the teams that deserve to get in are going to get into the playoff. No, that is not true, because what you have now done is reframe the discussion about who could be a playoff team. Well, more games are going to matter because these teams are going to be able to get in. Okay, that's kind of true on the one hand and then not true on the other hand because you delegitimize some of the biggest games of the year in college football. Alabama and the Iron Bowl last year, for instance, wouldn't have mattered. Would not have mattered. They would have been in the playoff either way. So I'll just put that sort of discussion aside for now and say that the people who argue in favor of playoff expansion say, well, you're going to get, the most deserving teams in. We have a structure that does that already. Oregon was not the combination of one of the best and most deserving teams in college football last year. That's why they weren't in the playoff. By the way, neither was Florida State. Florida State was very deserving, but they weren't one of the best. That's how the system should work in college football. The subjective nature of who gets into the playoff and who doesn't is not being removed. In fact, it, like the playoff, is being expanded. Because instead of looking at teams that actually could, in theory, make a national championship run or make noise in the playoff or beat one of the top teams in college football, instead of looking at one of those teams or a couple of those teams as, well, who should get in and who's going into the playoff and everything like that, you're now going to look at several at-large spots And you're going to be talking about teams that have no business being mentioned in the same breath, being in the same postseason environment as the best teams in college football. They just don't. And you have, of course, included in this structure an automatic guarantee for the group of five. Well, if you're going to let anybody and everybody in, sure, why the heck not? Oregon didn't make the playoff last year. They weren't good enough to get past Washington. Liberty would have been a playoff team last year. How'd that Fiesta Bowl go? Against a non-playoff team. There were teams in that playoff better than Oregon. You think Liberty's going to come in, make a bunch of noise? Arizona was a nice story last year. They ended the season, regular season 9-3. They won their bowl game. If they'd been in the top 10, you think they were ready to compete for a national championship, play with those sorts of teams? No. So what you have done in this playoff is you have delegitimized a large segment of the regular season, which I very much object to as a college football fan. You have expanded it for the purpose of financial benefit of people who you are never going to know, will never see, and it's money that you will never see, by the way. Some people get very weird about that. Some people are, it's you got to make more money, you got to do this. I'm like, are you a network executive at ESPN? Did I miss that? If network execs at ESPN are listening to this show, I'd be happy to send you my play-by-play demo reel, first of all. Second of all, I didn't know that people of that caliber listen to this sort of show. I'm glad that you do. So I think that for the Ducks, it absolutely helps. For college football, no, it is not good for the sport. And what you have done, to go back to your question, is it going to be more controversial? You're just going to have more debates. Because what we were doing previously is we have a good idea of who the top 3 teams or top 2 teams are going to be. We need to figure out which of these 3 or 4 teams go into these 2 spots. You are now going to expand that discussion. So the debates will run wild. Oh, how could you not do this? What about that team? What about? That's what you've done by expanding the playoff. Congratulations, people who have nothing to do with college football. You have contributed to making college football less awesome than it once was. But nostalgia is a powerful emotion. It'll continue to be that for me as we go forward here. And I will stubbornly commit to this particular talking point and belief, because it's not just a talking point. It is a belief that I've turned into a talking point. So hope that answers your question. Let's talk a little hoops before a personal mailbag question here. Basketball. Men's basketball specifically. The women are having a tough go of it this year. It is not what you would like to see. Tough times in Eugene for Kelly Graves and company. It's just been a rough year. Happens. It happens. It has been a tough one. So men's basketball under Dana Altman, though, they enter this week going against Stanford on Thursday night and Cal on Saturday. Now, on paper, you look at the records of Cal and Stanford and see that they are both under 500, Stanford by 1 game, Cal by a couple more, and you would think that Oregon should go in and get a couple of wins on the road. I'm going to make a prediction for you right here, right now. Oregon is not winning both of these games. They will split. They will split these games. If they were a tournament team, they'd win both of them. And maybe they're going to go out there and prove me wrong. I would love for that to be the case. I have just watched this team with Dana Altman at the helm, either this year or last year or the year before, too many times end up in this position. And this is where Oregon's at. It's not as if it's impossible. I continue to bring them up because getting to the NCAA tournament is not out of the realm of possibility. Yeah, there's the automatic berth in the Pac-12 championship game, or in the Pac-12 championship tournament, rather, in Las Vegas. But building an at-large resume is not impossible. Oregon has 6 games left in the regular season. Just 6. If they go 5-1 down the stretch, they'll end the season 22-9, and they would pick up wins against 2 of Utah, Colorado, and Arizona. Okay, if they do that, if they win their next 3 games, I think they'll beat Oregon State after they play the Bay Area schools this week. So if they win these next 2 games, and then they win against Oregon State, and they win 2 or 3 down the stretch, yeah, I think they'd probably get into the tournament. Here's the thing. I want that to happen very badly. I love college basketball. I want Oregon to be a part of it. I've seen Dana Altman take this team to the doorstep of the national championship game and would love to see them get back there again. I'm just saying, as my personal opinion, I don't think they have it in them. They have not been a good road team this year. And Cal is playing really good basketball right now. Stanford has been streaky and can shoot the daylights out of the ball. And Oregon has struggled defensively this season. They have been much better over the last couple weeks. If they defend against Stanford, they probably win the game. But I cannot see them right now winning 2 games in a row on the road, which is unfortunate because 5 of their final 6 games, or no, that's not true. I almost misspoke there. They have 2 on the road. Then they have 1 at home against Oregon State, 1 on the road against Arizona, 2 at home against Utah and Colorado. Go 5-1, you're probably in the tournament. Most likely outcome, Oregon probably goes 4-2 at best. 3-3 feels like it is very much in the cards. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But that's where I'm at with this team. They show flashes, but they are not consistent enough to give me the confidence that they can go 5-1 or 6-0 down the stretch. Let's end with this question here that came in from Bud via the subtext community. You have a great broadcasting style that combines a strong depth of knowledge of college sports with a light, sometimes humorous approach. I try. Thank you. I'm glad it's well received. Tell us how your experience with the Santa Clara University Stand-Up Comedy Club helped your broadcasting chops. This is some deep dive from an everydayer, not just on this show, but on Locked On College Football as well. And he is correct in the nugget that he has found. I did indeed participate in Santa Clara's Stand-Up Comedy Club in college, and I performed a couple of sets. If you would like to watch the better of the 2 sets, the first one went all right. It was not a disaster. I'd tell you if it was. The first one went all right. The second one, I'll be honest, went very well. As to your question, and so if you want to watch that, just shoot me a note and I'll find the YouTube video and I'll send you a link. To answer your question, those skills are so widely applicable to what I do professionally now. And this, of course, is my job and play-by-play for Southern Utah as well. Not just specific to the Santa Clara stand-up comedy. I mean, that helps, I think, the most in podcasting is, trying to be quick-witted or thinking of things or jokes or lines or trying to keep things humorous during the show. It absolutely helps. And I had no idea at the time that it would be such a big benefit. It absolutely has, been a benefit to me here in hosting the show. But in high school and college, I had to have an arts credit to graduate, and I took acting classes. Whereas other people did sculpting or drawing or whatever. I don't do any of that. I took acting classes, 2 in high school, 1 in college. And those schools and the improv units that were there, but everything else you learn, being comfortable speaking in public, talking on stage, getting uncomfortable, and all this sort of stuff has helped me tremendously. And I think it helps me be, rhythmic and comfortable on air and talking to people. I mean, there's nobody here, right, in my home office when I'm recording the show, but I know that people are listening or watching. And for some people, that makes them a little nervous. And for me, when I've been in those sorts of environments where I have to be uncomfortable in order to succeed, it's made it a lot easier to do this sort of stuff. So number 1, props to you for the deep dive on that particular tidbit. Number 2, again, if you want to watch that comedy set, the better of the 2, I'd be happy to send it along to you. I thought it was decently funny. And number 3, thanks for the question. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Tomorrow's show is great, by the way. Until then, go Ducks.